A visit to Cheboksary. Ukrainian missiles and drones visited the VNIIR Progress defense plant. A regime of silence. Starting at midnight between May 5th and 6th, Ukraine's defense forces will act exclusively in a mirrored fashion. The parade of victory frenzy. The so-called Russian Ministry of Defense threatens strikes on the center of Kyiv. Meanwhile, air defense systems are being brought to Moscow from all over Russia. Stolen Ukrainian wheat. Egypt supports illegal Russian exports. Politics and music, or music and politics. French President Macron performed Aznavour's chanson La Bohème, accompanied by Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan on drums. These and other topics in this episode. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Rabchuk, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, leave a like, and let's get to the news. Ukrainian missiles and drones paid a visit to Cheboksary last night and this morning. The VNIIR Progress defense plant was attacked. The enterprise supplies the Russian army with critically important electronics, including navigation modules for air defense systems, cruise and ballistic missiles, as well as drones. In other words, we are talking about a completely legitimate target that has been struck, an absolutely legitimate target. President Zelensky showed the launches of FP-5 Flamingo cruise missiles at a Russian military-industrial complex facility in Cheboksary. Let me remind you, that's more than 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine. These shots are impressive, as are the consequences of Ukraine's precise strikes. Ukraine is declaring a silence regime. President Zelensky announced this. Starting from midnight between May 5th and 6th, the defense forces will act in a mirrored manner. According to Zelensky, as of today, there has not been a single official request to Kyiv regarding the modalities of a ceasefire, which is being discussed on Russian social media. Human life is incomparably more valuable than any anniversary. It is time for the Russian leadership to take real steps to end their war, especially if the Russian Ministry of Defense believes it cannot hold a parade in Moscow without Ukraine's goodwill. And now regarding the publications on Russian social media that the president mentioned. In fact, they are not only talking about a ceasefire on May 8th and 9th, but also about threats. The so-called Russian Ministry of Defense claims that if Ukraine tries to interfere with the Victory Day celebrations, a retaliatory strike will be carried out on the center of Kyiv. I'll add from myself, if they could, they would have done it long ago. Air defense systems are being brought to Moscow from all over Russia. Machine gunners are stationed on the Kremlin towers. Putin is preparing for the parade and, it seems, is afraid. The armed forces of Ukraine are also preparing for this event. Well, how are they preparing? They're zeroing in.
Hooray!
Putin managed to turn the May 9th parade from a Russian triumph into a march of shame and fear.
A direct confrontation with neo-Nazis and Banderites, on whom the United States and their junior partners have heavily staked their strategic interests, will be absolutely unavoidable in the long run. Russia delivered a preemptive response to the aggression.
Ukrainian birds are flying all over the center of the Russian capital.
Do you hear that? Oh, there it is. It's right above my house.
And the closer it gets to the parade, the scarier it becomes.
This will be the first time there are no weapons at the parade, and Ukrainian drones might fly in during the parade.
Air defense systems are being brought into the Russian capital from Kazan and Grozny to protect the parade, and they plan to create several layers of defense.
Can you imagine? It's a nightmare. But that's not all.
Security measures are in place around the entire capital. There are checkpoints at the entrances. Access to Red Square is blocked. Right next to the Kremlin, there are armored vehicles and SUVs, and on the Kremlin's walls and towers, there are machine gunners. There's even a security officer with a machine gun hiding on the Spasskaya Tower of the Kremlin. Not even in his worst nightmares did Putin imagine that literally on every tower, wall, and just about every building of the Kremlin, special forces operatives would be stationed with machine guns, sniper rifles, and special equipment. All just to make sure Ukrainian drones don't reach the bunker dweller. The system set up on the rooftops of high-rise buildings turned out to be largely ineffective, and Muscovites are fleeing the city en masse.
Against the backdrop of this terrorist threat, of course, all possible measures are being taken to minimize the danger.
And these are the consequences of a Ukrainian drone hitting a high-rise in Moscow, just 5 days before the parade and only 6 kilometers from the Kremlin. As we can see, the air defense systems hastily moved to the city center in a panic did not help.
Testing 1, 2, hello there. The very first one we have is this right here. And 2.
As it turned out, the Ukrainian FP1 made it through 3 layers of air defense. On this map, there are 101 confirmed air defense positions, and the route itself passed through the area of responsibility of at least 10 S-400 regiments, as well as dozens of Pantsir and Tor systems, which the bunker dweller is so proud of. At the same time, memes about preparations for the event are actively spreading online. Ukrainians are joking about heightened security measures and generating amusing images. From "we will defeat Ukraine in 2 days" to "the war has reached the very capital of the Russian Federation." And while Ukrainians laugh at this absurdity, Putin is tearfully begging Ukraine for a ceasefire on May 9th.
Imagine Stalin in a phone conversation with President Roosevelt proposing to Hitler to establish a ceasefire on November 7th. There you go. So to speak, in honor, accordingly, of the great holiday, even Vitaly Averyanov, the deputy chairman of the Izborsk Club, said, "How is that? It's ambiguous. On May 9th, the topic of Ukraine's denazification was supposedly raised. Supposedly there are heirs of Nazism there. And on May 9th, to call on, as it were, the spiritual heirs of Nazism, to declare a ceasefire on May 9th.
Back at the beginning of April, the Kremlin dictator was informed about the dangers of holding the May parade. Pro-war blogger Ilya Tumanov, also known as Fight Bomber, said that the authorities were discussing where to hold the parade at all, in Moscow or in St. Petersburg.
Can you imagine, right at that moment, during the parade, when they call everyone to attention, a missile alert is announced? And then what? What will happen? Well, obviously the image will be ruined, you see? And what will be happening on the square and around it? Well, it would be quite an event, to say the least. And of course, it would be a significant blow in terms of media coverage. I mean, I even think that maybe nothing would actually reach there, but something still has to be done.
The parade rehearsal has still not been announced, even though it is usually held at the end of April. Rehearsals always used to start in Alabino, but even in the training grounds group, where preparations are covered every year, there is nothing, except for news about parts of the event being cut.
In the pursuit of achieving strategic goals and in solving vital tasks for the sake of Russia, its enduring greatness, and its future prosperity. Glory to the victorious people!
Putin has demilitarized the Victory Parade. According to a statement from the Ministry of Defense, there will be no heavy equipment, which has always been present at the parade. Only cadets will march in the column.
Cadets from the Suvorov Military and Nakhimov Naval Schools, as well as Cadet Corps and the Military Equipment Column, due to the current operational situation, will not participate in the military parade this year.
At the crossings on Tverskaya Street, they put up supports just for show. They used to block off the road for the passage of that very heavy equipment.
Red Square is being intensively prepared for the events, but the number of guests has been greatly reduced. This is evident from the stands. As for the dress rehearsal, the date of May 4th was announced, but these dates keep changing.
The sky will be closed. The most Russians will see this year are the Strigi, who have always participated in the aerial part of the Victory Parade before, while their show is still being considered. In Moscow, they are planning to shut off mobile internet during the May holidays.
Everything is going exactly according to plan. According to plan. According to plan. Just according to plan. Right on schedule.
Only a small number of leaders will attend this parade. Yes, I realize that this year, without Xi Jinping as the Kremlin's umbrella, it is especially vulnerable. As we can see, Putin is trying to avoid public humiliation, especially in the eyes of his own people. But so far, he hasn't succeeded.
By the way, about Russian air defense. Just days before the Victory Parade frenzy, some interesting footage was captured in the skies over Moscow. A Russian Ka-52 attack helicopter is trying to catch up with a Ukrainian drone. If this video were a meme, the caption would be something like, "The Russian capital is under full protection." We'll return to the topic of the parade later in the context of the participation of world leaders. But for now, a bit more about the situation in Moscow. There, communication isn't working, ATMs and terminals are down, and payments can only be made in cash. People online are already joking that apparently this is exactly what going back to the USSR looks like. At the same time, due to the threat of drones, the cover plan has been declared at all 4 airports in the Russian capital. In the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 970 occupiers killed and wounded. Thus, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, this brings the total to 1,336,120 occupiers. In addition, over the past 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 3 armored combat vehicles, 80 artillery systems, and dozens more pieces of other Russian military equipment. Record losses and not a single breakthrough. In April, the Russian army effectively failed its offensive. All the details coming up next.
Instead of the loudly announced major offensive, there have been retreats and loss of positions. April 2026, a month the Russian command will try to forget. According to the Institute for the Study of War, the occupiers not only failed to advance, but also lost about 116 square kilometers of territory. This is the worst result since August 2024, during the time of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Kursk operation.
At the moment, the line of contact is practically at the same boundaries as it was a year ago. This indicates that Ukraine's defense forces not only held back further advances by the occupiers, but also successfully counterattacked in several sectors of the front. We are talking about the successful actions of Ukraine's defense forces at the junction of the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions.
The statistics speak for themselves. The average rate of advance of Russian troops has dropped to 2.9 square kilometers per day. A year ago, this figure was 3 times higher, almost 10, and over the past 6 months, Russia has managed to capture only 1,443 square kilometers, compared to more than 2,360 during the same period last year. In other words, the pace of the offensive has not just slowed down, it has collapsed.
There are several reasons for this. First, the strikes by Ukraine's defense forces on enemy depots, headquarters, and logistics. Second, communication problems. Restricted access to Starlink in the occupied territories and the Kremlin's control over Telegram have significantly complicated the coordination of units.
Ukraine's defense forces are successfully holding back the occupiers' advance in the Pokrovsk direction. The occupiers' offensive in this sector of the front has already been ongoing for more than 18 months.
But Russia is trying to convince people otherwise. One of the tactics is the so-called gray zones. Territories where there is no stable control are presented as captured. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War note that Russia's actual control is much less than what propaganda claims. However, at the same time, the very tactics of warfare are also changing. As reported by the British publication The Telegraph, Russia is gradually abandoning mass assaults, the so-called meat grinder tactics, which resulted in enormous losses. The enemy is now switching to a different tactic.
Small groups of 2 to 4 soldiers, sometimes even lone soldiers, advance on foot, often at night, with minimal radio communication. Their task is to find weak spots in the defense, infiltrate deep into the positions unnoticed, and establish a foothold there. Experts note that such groups are harder to detect and destroy than larger units.
Despite attempts to adapt, the key trend for Russia remains negative. The effectiveness of the offensive has been declining for several consecutive months, ever since the end of 25.
Despite all the statements from both the Russian political and military leadership, including at the highest representative level, about full control over Kupiansk and Kupiansk, these settlements are not under the control of the occupying forces, but rather under the control of Ukraine's defense forces.
An additional blow to the enemy comes from Ukrainian attacks on economic and logistical infrastructure. In particular, ships of the so-called Shadow Fleet near Novorossiysk, which were used to circumvent sanctions and export oil, were recently struck. And while the Kremlin tries to hide its failure, the front increasingly reveals the real picture. Russia is losing momentum, territory, and initiative.
Now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it. Please do it right now. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Ukraine is strengthening its border with the so-called Transnistria. This is what the fortifications in this area look like. A layered defense system is being established there with lateral roads and logistics for rapid troop maneuvering. Representatives of the Western Operational Command noted that these measures are related to the presence of the Russian contingent in Transnistria, as well as the unstable situation. Armenia stands with Ukraine. President Zelensky paid an official visit to Yerevan. He took part in the European Political Community Summit, spoke with Prime Minister Pashinyan and other leaders. Next, let's talk about what the politicians discussed and what agreements were reached.
Another blow to the dictator. Putin's geopolitical plans are failing.
I can scarcely contribute any additional insights, at this point in time.
Armenia is changing its direction. European leaders are gathering for 2 unprecedented summits in Yerevan, which for a long time was considered Russia's closest ally in the South Caucasus. Also on Sunday, the president of Ukraine arrived in the Armenian capital. Volodymyr Zelensky has already held a series of meetings with the heads of government of Norway, Finland, the United Kingdom, and the Czech Republic. The Ukrainian leader is using this summit to discuss further military assistance to Kyiv with European partners, as well as the prospects for negotiations to end the Russian-Ukrainian war.
We need to focus on what we will do if Russia does not end this war. We need to keep up the pressure and we need peace. And of course, that is number one. We need to find a workable diplomatic format. Europe must be at the table for any negotiations.
Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the Armenian capital is unprecedented. His participation in the summit and his appearance alongside Prime Minister Pashinyan is a powerful signal to Putin that the Caucasus is no longer the Kremlin's backyard.
Well, just imagine, really, until quite recently, Russian intelligence agencies, the FSB, operated in Armenia as if they were at home. They controlled the airport, and basically, yes, they controlled key sectors of the economy. And again, the Russian Federation's military base. And just imagine what a blow this is, what a slap in the face, especially right before May 9th, a sacred date for Putin, when Zelensky arrives at the European Community Summit.
For the first time, a country that for decades was Russia's closest military ally in the Caucasus is hosting the leaders of nearly 50 European states. This is essentially a demonstration of a new direction from Moscow to Brussels. This is the first ever bilateral EU-Armenia summit in history, which will be attended by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa.
By holding a summit at such a high level with a focus on security, specifically in Armenia, Europe is also sending a strong signal to the countries of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, and most importantly, of course, to the Russian Federation, that restoring its spheres of influence, as Putin has dreamed of and as existed during the Soviet Union, is now an absolutely unattainable and unrealistic goal for him.
Russia's inability to fulfill the role of security guarantor has led to a logical outcome. Armenia is turning toward Europe. This is yet another indication that the post-Soviet space is no longer a monopoly playing field for the Kremlin.
Putin's influence in the South Caucasus has significantly weakened since the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine. The amount of resources that Putin can accumulate to advance his own policies has narrowed significantly, and we see this not only in the Caucasus but also in Central Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. For Putin, the attack on Ukraine has in fact become the decisive factor that has greatly diminished his status as an international player.
Relations between Russia and Armenia are experiencing a deep crisis. After the CSTO refused to help Armenia during the conflict with Azerbaijan, Yerevan began to distance itself from Moscow. For Putin, this means yet another painful blow to his ambitions to maintain control over neighboring countries.
The lack of support from Moscow became the last straw in the relationship between Armenia and the Russian Federation. In Yerevan, they are fully and acutely aware of the fact that Russia tends to impose a wide variety of complex conditions. But at the same time, it appears increasingly unwilling to function as a sovereign state that provides the specific benefits that can be delivered by other countries that act as dominant regional hegemonic powers.
The summit on May 4th to 5th becomes the point of no return, where Armenia effectively trades outdated Russian guarantees for real integration into the Western security and economic architecture.
Let's return to the topic of victory frenzy in Russia. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico stated that he will not attend the May 9th parade in Moscow. At the same time, he noted that he will still visit the Russian capital for a meeting with Putin. Let me remind you, yesterday Fico spoke with President Zelensky and stated that Slovakia supports Ukraine's accession to the EU and is ready to help along this path. What unexpected and pleasant changes? I wonder what will happen next. We are following the developments. Berlin has banned the display of the flags of the USSR, Russia and Belarus on May 8th and 9th. Also banned are the symbols Z and V in the context of the Russian war, St. George's ribbons, military uniforms, and their elements. The window of opportunity for a Russian attack on Europe, that's how military analysts describe the next 2 years. Such assessments are being made in the context of the White House's decision to withdraw its contingent from allied countries. Europe may also be left without American ballistic missiles.
As long as Donald Trump is in power in the White House, the next 2 years may be seen by Putin as a window of opportunity to attack Europe. During this period, Russia could attack one of the European countries to test the West's commitment to NATO. This is reported by Politico.
As stated by 3 European politicians directly familiar with the course of the discussions and interviewed for this article, although Russia's war in Ukraine has shown the limits of Moscow's power, the Russian president has long signaled his desire to seize more territory. Something unexpected may happen soon. Russia has an open window of opportunity, said Mikko Aaltola, a Finnish center-right member of the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. The US is withdrawing from Europe and transatlantic relations are in a dire state. The EU is not yet fully ready to take on responsibility, according to Politico.
There is a threat, there is a challenge. I think NATO will survive, but right now it is weakened. This organization, due to Trump's role, the possibility or willingness of the US to honor its commitments regarding collective defense and collective security under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. Indeed, if Russia was suddenly to strike today, God forbid, at the territory of, say, Lithuania or Poland or some other country, would the Americans really be ready to stand up for these countries and fulfill their collective obligations regarding collective defense? This is where questions arise.
The American president is very angry with Europe because the leaders of the old world are not supporting him in the war against Iran. Disagreements between Trump and German Chancellor Merkel over the war in the Middle East led Washington to cancel the deployment of the American contingent, which was armed with several types of long-range weapons. And this decision coincided with the White House's plan to withdraw 5,000 military personnel from Germany. This sends a signal to the Kremlin that the US is stepping back from its central role as Europe's security guarantor. We already knew this, but now it has materialized in terms of capabilities. Carlo Massala, professor of international politics. Europe has long been dependent on the US and its military capabilities. This is especially true for long-range missiles, which will be difficult to replace right away. But it seems that Europe, and Germany in particular, is prepared for such a turn of events.
Germany is currently rearming and is allocating a large amount of resources to its own rearmament. And it is seriously raising the issue of mobilizing military training for servicemen in Germany and improving the capacity to produce new modern weapons, including in cooperation with Ukraine. Germany's Defense Minister Pistorius responded calmly, saying that it is Trump's right to decide where American troops will be stationed.
In the 5th year of the war with Ukraine, Russia is severely depleted, and Putin currently lacks the resources and manpower to attack European countries. The exception is the Baltic states, one of which the Russian Federation might still attack in order to sow discord within NATO. The stumbling block within the alliance could be Article 5 on mutual defense, and the main question is whether to invoke it or stand aside. Putin might initiate a horizontal escalation of the conflict with another neighbor, trying to avoid humiliating negotiations with Ukraine. Gabrielis Landsbergis, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, Europe needs to strengthen its missile defense and overall readiness in light of delays in American arms deliveries due to the war in Iran, and also provide maximum support to Ukraine because at this moment Ukraine is the very country holding back Russia from attacking European NATO members.
Egypt has allowed the vessel Samathas to unload nearly 27,000 tons of stolen Ukrainian wheat at the port of Abu Qir. This is already the 4th such case. I would add that Ukraine has officially appealed to Cairo regarding this illegal cargo, which was exported through temporarily occupied Crimea, and has provided all legal grounds for the arrest of the vessel. But it didn't work out. Finally, a word about politics in music, or music in politics. French President Emmanuel Macron performed La Bohème by chansonnier Charles Aznavour, accompanied by Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan on drums. The politicians put on this performance during a state dinner in Yerevan. Caution, Macron is singing and Pashinyan is playing. as is. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Strength to the Ukrainian defenders, both men and women. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this video. See you next time.